All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the next panel here today at the WNE. My name is Brian Fehrenbach with the Organization of Canadian Nuclear Industries, and our panel today will focus on what I think everybody is trying to achieve here at the World Nuclear Exhibition, right? We're here not only to talk about what we're doing in our own countries, but how can we collaborate better to grow and get stronger? And so to help me with that, I have three of Canada's representatives of Canada's leading nuclear or soon-to-be nuclear entities spread across our country. And so from Ontario, representing Ontario Power Generation, Jeffrey Olnick. Each of the panelists will introduce themselves in more detail in a minute. Next to Jeffrey from the province of Quebec, working in the province of Quebec, Laurent Peffercorn from Vaillant. And then on the right, from the province of Saskatchewan, Rhea Brown from Sask Power. And so what I hope to do today is engage the panelists in a series of questions that helps you, the audience, understand what avenues are there for collaboration, either in business development, projects, or workforce development around the world working with Canada. And so, Rhea, starting with you. Introduce yourself, your role, and why you are here at the World Nuclear Exhibition 2025.
Well, thank you, Brian, and thanks to OCNI for this awesome opportunity. So I am Rhea Brown, and I work for Sask Power, which is our Saskatchewan power company in the province of Saskatchewan. I'm the executive vice president that oversees the supply chain and all the customers, so I have a very unique role. And we are pretty new to nuclear, so we're a couple years into nuclear. And it's a pretty big deal in our province. So in Saskatchewan, you know, we are a very small province and a small power utility. We have about 1 million people in Saskatchewan, and we have 500,000 customer accounts. And we do all of our own services. So generation, transmission, and distribution are all overseen by our Crown Corporation. And so for us, we have a new challenge on our hands, and that is nuclear. So we're new to nuclear. We will be the first greenfield nuclear project in Canada in over 40 years in Saskatchewan. And so I came to the WNE to learn, to make new connections, because what's clear to me is in this space, it is the collaboration that really matters. We can't do this ourselves. So it's about putting together the pieces of the supply chain and learning where and what expertise comes from different parts of the world, and where I need to start thinking about partnerships to bridge the gap between what we have to offer in Canada, which is a very strong supply chain, and then Saskatchewan as well. But where do we need to make those new connections to really help us enable our project? I want to do this very, very well. I'm sure all of you do as well. And it's a big accountability. So I'm here at WNE. It's an incredible stage for me to learn. Like, I've never been at a trade show like this in my whole life. So I'm taking advantage of this opportunity to learn from you and make these new connections that'll help us with our new nuclear project.
That's great, Rhea. And I think, so nuclear, we've learned, OPG taught us this lesson in the planning. The more time you spend planning for something, the better you'll be able to execute. So the fact that you guys are here now thinking about it is just going to set yourselves up for success. Laurent, please.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Laurent Peffercorn. I'm the EVP of Global Sales for Vaillant. So Vaillant is a manufacturer of industrial valves in nuclear, but not only. So we're not new to nuclear. We've been around for 75 years, and basically we've been working on nuclear since the beginning of the CANDU program in Canada. Today we're installed in over 90% of all nuclear power plants in North America and in every single CANDU plants across the world. So we're Quebec-based, headquartered in Quebec, but we have 11 plants in 9 different countries. And WNE for us is a very nice opportunity, first of all, to present ourselves as part of the Canadian supply chain and the Canadian nuclear program, which is very important, but also to meet with our customers, the existing ones, the would-be customers, our partners. So it's a great opportunity to network for a couple of days and talk about projects and showcase as well what we're doing, what we're changing in our program. So nice event.
That's great. Happy that you're here. That's really interesting from your perspective, because this isn't as much of a foreign country for Vaillant as it is for many others. So it's almost like, I was going to say your home away from home, but we'll just say your other home. All right, Jeffrey.
Yeah, thanks, Brian, and thanks, everybody. So I'm Jeff Holnick, Director of Strategy and Business Development in the New Nuclear Development Group at OPG. So OPG is not new to nuclear. It's the largest nuclear utility in Canada and has been operating plants, CANDU plants, for about half a century. It's my first WNE, and OPG's increased presence here is because we are building on what we're doing, building the world's first commercial grid-scale SMR outside Russia and China, the first in the world. At Darlington, we're building the GE BWRX 300 technology there, and we're starting to expand beyond the borders of Ontario. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean, going and building plants all over the place, but what we're starting to do is actually take that expertise and that know-how and start to support SMR projects outside Ontario. Obviously we're having certain discussions in Western Canada with our partners in Sask Power, as well as other parts of Canada. But more exciting, as you're starting to see a real turnaround of attitudes to nuclear in Western Europe, and really the beginnings of SMR build programs, we're in some pretty exciting discussions to support those SMR programs with our lessons learned, with operational services, and with a fleet approach to SMR operations. So we are here indeed, like others, to learn about the supply chain, to foster collaboration on supply chain, meet new suppliers for our own build program in Ontario, but also to start to have these discussions on how we can start to build a global fleet of SMRs and really get to the kind of standardization and a true fleet approach that we're going to need to see if we're going to triple nuclear.
You mentioned sharing expertise, and I think that's one of the fantastic things that OPG has been doing. I mean, we all know its track record as an operator, WNE ratings #1 at its plant, but in terms of how to set up a project, how to run a nuclear site, I think the fact that you're sharing that expertise with other potential clients is a unique offering that'll really benefit people. So, people may have heard there's a lot going on in Canada. We've had a number of announcements at our pavilion. There are a number of projects either started or soon to be underway. And so what I'd like to find out from each of the panelists now is, given that there's a lot underway now in the Canadian nuclear market, are you also looking to have international opportunities, or will that distract you? How do you balance local Canadian growth with expansion in other markets? And Jeff, we'll start with you this time and work our way the other way.
Sure, thanks. So the question is this a distraction or is this a new opportunity? And we get that question a lot, right? Because we're doing a lot at home. We're building the SMRs. We're studying refurbishing the Pickering plant. We're just finishing refurbishing the Darlington plant. We're doing early investigations of large build, which we're looking at different technologies, including CANDU at Wesleyville. And so there is a lot going on at home. We think of the international opportunity as partly an opportunity for revenue and diversified revenue that isn't tied to one market, which is an opportunity, but also nuclear for a long time, we all know, right, has had this problem of the plants being slightly different and, this not redundant, but like repeated functions at each plant, because you have a slightly different configuration, because you have a slightly different history on each plant. And we really see the opportunity for increased harmonization, standardization, fleet approaches to these things. We think the regulators are starting to think in that way too, because everybody's trying to figure out how to enable a tripling of nuclear, right? And so for us, it's not just an opportunity to sell expertise and services and bring in some revenue. It is that, but it is also an opportunity to really push forward on the idea of international fleets of nuclear reactors and really get to a true fleet approach with synergies like you see in a lot of other industries, right? And that's what's going to help enable the rapid growth we're going to need to see.
So Laurent, I guess from your perspective, it's a little bit different because you're all around the world anyway.
Correct. We already are around the world, and actually we do nuclear, but not only nuclear. We are in oil and gas, in mining, in petrochemical. 80% of what you do is around energy, and 90% is export. So for us, it's an interesting question because that's going to increase the Canadian portion of our business and not the other way around. Having said that, it's a global expansion as well. We have installed base in France, in Europe, in China, in Korea, in Latin America, and it's going to continue. We're working with all technologies across the world, in the nuclear world, but of course we have a special love for CANDO, obviously, being Canadians, and we're very confident that CANDO will expand in Asia, in other regions of the world, and we strongly intend to be part of that expansion. So yes, we'll be going even further internationally.
That's great. Ria, I know it's a little bit of a different style question for you, but what are your thoughts on the balance of local versus international?
Well, it's interesting because I actually think it is an incredible opportunity because, of course, we all know this. There's a big focus on Canada and a Canadian supply chain. I'm from Saskatchewan. It's what can we do to grow economic development in Saskatchewan? So there's always that a bit of a mindset of like enabling our own. But when you think about the call to action, which is tripling the nuclear capacity by 2050, that's a global effort. That's a global call to action. So in some ways, the supply chain has to have that global aspect, and there's going to be suppliers that we need to access internationally. So I think it's about what does Canada do best, but where do we have those gaps? Where are we constrained? Where do we need a redundancy? Where do we need to bring in new suppliers to expand our capabilities? So it's about making those assessments, because I do think that the international opportunities are there, but it's about navigating that and putting these pieces of a puzzle together to figure out what best opportunities those are. And when we talk about partnerships, it has to be that too. It has to be reciprocal. So if you want to work with us, I think that we have an opportunity to engage international suppliers and what that means to Saskatchewan, what we look for, what we value, and learning more about you and how that relationship can work, because there's very different cultures between Canada or Saskatchewan and international supply chains. And so to make it work, it has to be more than a transactional approach. And so I do think that there's elements of understanding what that means, because partnerships mean different things to different countries, but I see it as an incredible opportunity.
So then, given that SaskPower's need to engage with suppliers is a little bit further, what's your message today to French suppliers?
Well, I think to French suppliers, I want to say bonjour. Did I do okay? A little, no?
Très bien.
So I think what I want to say truly, though, is understand our values, what we are looking for. So, for example, you know, when you want to talk about working with Saskatchewan, you know, for us, we have a huge focus on localization. So how can you help our local suppliers grow their capacity and capabilities? What opportunities exist for them in France? But also in Saskatchewan, we have a huge focus on reconciliation and understanding what that means to us. That might be a word you're not familiar with, but that means Indigenous reconciliation, Indigenous partnerships. We have a big focus in Saskatchewan for Indigenous procurement and economic development. We're actually a leader across Canada, where 22% of our spend, our local spend, is with Indigenous suppliers. So in France, especially, if you want to learn about us and partnering with us, we're going to say, what are your efforts to localize in Saskatchewan? What are your efforts to form partnerships with local suppliers? What are your efforts to form partnerships with women-owned businesses, Indigenous businesses? Those are the things that matter to us. It's unique and it's different to Saskatchewan, but it's also something across Canada that you're going to want to learn and understand before we figure out if this is a partnership that could work for us.
So Laurent, your message to French suppliers may usually be in French, but we'll do it in English today.
That's okay. So it's going to be twofold. So if you're a French manufacturer of valves, stay home, stay away. Any other supplier, more seriously, the first question to be asked is, what can you bring? I mean, we have a pretty mature supply chain in nuclear in Canada, because it's been decades that we're operating successfully utilities. So ask yourself the question, like in any other market, what can I bring that's not existing in the country? What's different? What can improve the existing offer? And what's that's done? Look at partners, look at partnerships. You mentioned that is very important. People who know the market, who know how it operates, who can bring you in and carry along the project. That's what we're doing in countries like Japan or South Korea, who have their own industry. We go through partners, we go through agents or distributors, whatever, and see what is different that we can add to the fold and make it successful.
And Jeff, from your perspective, please.
So I'm not from the supply chain group, so I don't have as many specific comments about that. But in general, when it comes to international collaboration and suppliers, the first thing I'd note is we are at a moment right now where there is a huge push for increased transatlantic trade between Canada and the European Union and partners in Europe and in Asia. And so this is a unique opportunity to foster some new partnerships. In OPG, as was discussed, the majority of our supply chain is localized. When we're building our new reactors, the majority of the supply chain is from Canada, but we're always looking for new opportunities to diversify the supply chain, the non-Canadian part of the supply chain, in particular, given current trade situation and everything, to consider European partnerships on this stuff. So we are at a unique moment. And we're seeing that on what I work on too, which is SMR support more at the programmatic level. There is a real political push and a desire to foster transatlantic partnerships right now. And the other comment I guess I'd make is as this industry becomes ideally more of fleet approach and more harmonized and things like that, all of our national regulators are going to have to play a role in this. And they're going to have to hear that from their own industry. So in Canada, OPG is taking a role on talking to our regulator, which is the CNSC, around the need and desire to collaborate with other regulators so that we can harmonize standards and we can have more international trade on these things. And for European suppliers, taking that message to your own governments and your own nuclear regulators is going to be a key part of this.
So it's clear that there are a lot of opportunities and partnerships are important. But in order for us to have had this wealth of opportunities, we have to have done well at home. And part of doing well at home is a high public acceptance. And so OPG has done a very good job, and SaskPower in their current operations has good, and already Saskatchewan is looking at high public acceptance of nuclear. And you also need host communities that not only will tolerate, but want. They want the good jobs. They want the high-paying opportunities. So I'm going to go off script for a second here, and I'm going to pull into the audience to Chair Adrian Foster, who's the chair of the Canadian Association of Nuclear Host Communities. So, Mr. Foster, can you give us for 1 minute, what is the best recipe for a host community to really support a nuclear project? You have to come up here to the mic, and I'm going to take it away after 1 minute, so be warned.
Okay, that was a surprise. Thank you for that. So a couple of things. The host communities, generally speaking, are exceptionally supportive of the nuclear industry. We love you folks, but you talked about partnerships. It's a two-way street. So it's very much understanding that your host community is there, they are supportive, but very much a partnership between the community itself and a partnership with the industry. And that's probably the simplest way of putting it.
Agreed.
Was that less than a minute?
It was. World record.
Shortest a politician has ever spoken.
Okay. So, but that's something Canada can offer to other countries that are new to nuclear as well. You may be shifting away from another industry, or you may have to overcome some of the earliest stigma that nuclear projects have had in the past. And so not only do Canadian companies and Canadian operators understand technology and operations, but also the social aspect of how to get your country to embrace nuclear energy, because let's face it, it's clean, reliable, secure baseload energy that if we can do it well, it's the best energy to have in the world. But we're all collectively facing a little bit of a problem if we want to build everything that we're planning, and that, of course, is workforce and labor development. You know, every country has plans for projects. We're lucky in Canada to have had life extension projects underway for the last 9-10 years that have really engaged the supply chain, kept the workforce up. But we're going to need help when our nuclear expansion comes, and so will many others. And so, you know, Rhea, starting with you, what is Saskatchewan doing as SaskPower to build a skilled workforce and resilient supply chain to support new nuclear projects?
Well, that's the question of the day, isn't it? It's like the top 3 challenges ever discussed in nuclear is financing, supply chain, and workforce. And so with workforce, I actually think there's so much more we could be doing, but I think that's a global effort here. One of the things that we're focused on in Saskatchewan is the education aspects, and we've heard this. You'd have to start in the elementary schools and the high schools. But one thing that we did pretty recently is we funded 4 research chairs. So we have 2 universities in Saskatchewan, so we have a research chair at each one, and then the First Nations University, we funded a research chair there, and also Sask Polytechnic, our trade school. So we have 4 research chairs that'll develop the nuclear education programs, attract the students to go through and be part of our workforce. So that's something pretty recently that we announced. But the workforce in general, like, we need skilled trades for all of the work that we have. So one thing that we're pretty focused on in Saskatchewan is women in the trades and Indigenous women in the trades. So we've been going into high schools to attract people to work in our power plants, and that will lend itself to working in a nuclear power plant. And when we talk about hosting communities, one of the advantages of the area that we selected for our BWRX 300 project is that we have a workforce there that right now is supporting our coal plants. And so for us to have a success with workforce, it's not just the education that we're setting up, it's also enabling this workforce and training to have a career in nuclear. But I think it's also apprenticeships, and I think that that's something I'm learning from European countries, of the apprenticeships across all facets of work across nuclear, and I think that's something that we could learn from.
So actually, Laurent, I didn't prep you for this, but I'm just thinking on my feet here. How has the shutdown, pause, perhaps restart in the future of nuclear energy in Quebec affected labor and nuclear-ready labor and workforce Quebec? No issues, or has it had an impact?
It had an impact, and actually had the same impact it had in France when France stopped for 10, 15 years, and it was out of fashion, because those skills take years to develop, and you need to have a long-term view. If you don't have a long-term view, it's hard to convince people to study on that. So yes, it had an impact. What I find really interesting and remarkable is that there is now an ecosystem in Quebec that is starting to be put in place with the industry, utilities, supply chain, academics, to try to get back on our feet and be ready for what's coming next. It's already the case in Ontario and now Saskatchewan. Ontario, obviously, but the good thing is there's no competition within the industry on those talents. We're trying to avoid poaching people from one another, because that's going to slow down everyone, and that's the only thing. So yes, Quebec is still behind. Hopefully things are changing. The social acceptance will evolve in a positive way.
I was just going to follow up with you. Are you willing to make a prediction on whether or not there's a return in our career with nuclear energy in Quebec?
I'll take bets, but you have to put money on the table.
Okay, fine. All right, and then of course, Jeff, we all know OPG has a strong program. Do you want to elaborate on how you're looking to develop skilled trades and workforce?
Yeah, so OPG has the advantage of having started on a major CANDU refurbishment about 10 years ago. It's sort of on track it is on track for completion next year. We often talk about walk before you run in OPG, and how the refurb project is what allowed Ontario and OPG to start to rebuild the supply chain and workforce and project execution capability after there was a pause in Ontario too, because between the end of Darlington construction in 1993 and the beginning of the refurb projects, there wasn't a lot of new nuclear activity. There's obviously sustaining capital, but we had the same problem too, with young people not wanting to go into the industry. And you don't just follow Ontario trends, you follow global trends on these things, right? But not a lot of new large capital investment in the projects in Ontario. Then what you saw was the refurb projects coming at Bruce and at Darlington. And that was what allowed us to start to rebuild and build new, both the workforce, the skilled trade workforce that's now up to nuclear quality standards, and the supply chain, which now is incredibly vigorous, right, and is mostly within Ontario. From that, we've taken that supply chain, and a lot of the same suppliers that were on the CANDU refurb project are on our GE SMR project now, and we're continuing to develop that supply chain toward our new large build that we're looking at for Wesleyville, which very well could be a new CANDU, the first new large CANDU in Canada in kind of 30 years, right? So for us, it has been this walk before you run and progressive development, realizing not all jurisdictions have the luxury of the same amount of time that OPG took. We really have found that building that up over time is what has allowed us to get the mature supply chain. We all know that the supply chain difficulties caused problems on Vogel, caused problems on Olkiluoto with project delivery. That's what we've been really trying to avoid by progressively building up that supply chain. And I think the others spoke very well about the efforts undertaken for workforce and recruitment of women in Indigenous communities, and really of all communities, right? Working directly in the high schools, and now even earlier through public education programs to get into the schools, and even to have children excited about this as a career.
Right. So it sounds like there's some good plans and programs in place, but one of the barriers I still see is provincial requirements, whether or not it's engineering qualification, welding certification, and sometimes even site-specific training requirements between different power plants. So I know this is off script, but it's in the same theme, and I guess this is really, Jeffrey, for you and maybe Rhea for you to speculate on. What can we do better to overcome the requirement to retrain, recertify in different provinces or stations?
Yeah, and obviously a hot topic in Canada right now, interprovincial trade, right? We need to be breaking down interprovincial trade barriers. We already collaborate with Bruce Power extensively on the CANDU refurbishment. So Darlington refurbishment, replacing the CANDU Calandria. Bruce refurbishment uses the same welders, uses the same skilled trades. There's not that many of them. We had to coordinate already. As Saskatchewan begins their SMR build program, and we're continuing with our units 2, 3, 4, we're going to anticipate much of the same kind of thing, right? And there's already a lot of trade across Canada in the oil field services and everything like that. There are challenges. We have different unions and different collective bargaining agreements in different provinces. And this is not the kind of thing that you can tear down overnight, because there's a lot of work put into that collective bargaining. And you're going to have to work this out in a way that opportunities are created for all the unions in the right way. But we don't see any way that you're going to triple nuclear in Canada without collaboration and coordination across the provinces, and ultimately, potentially even internationally. I know there's not a lot of trade in skilled trades between Europe and Canada right now on this stuff, but there may be opportunities to collaborate.
Are there plans with SAS Power? I mean, so far all of your business is in Saskatchewan, so you haven't faced this. But you mentioned Polytechnique and some of those others. Are those universities looking at perhaps some way of increasing the number of nuclear engineering grads or transferability of degrees?
I don't know about transferability of degrees. I think that's something I'll have to look into a little bit more. But yes, increasing the students coming into these nuclear programs and the number of graduates to work on our project is a focus of our universities. But when you talk about the complexities, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's quite complex. And when we talk about unions too, you don't unwind that in a day. But I think that it's stopping with this silo mentality province by province and truly opening up the borders to have these discussions. But I think it starts with having someone dedicated to work on it, so it's not just talk anymore. It's who are the people that are working on the transferability of the skills or the education. So I think that we haven't really, I don't think we've dug deep enough into that yet, and that's something that needs to be explored within the next couple of years.
Right, agreed. And OCNI can maybe help you with that. So I had hoped to leave some time for questions from the audience, but we're right up against it now. However, we do have 20 minutes now following this in the networking room. So please feel free to join us. Pepper my panelists with your thoughts and your questions. And let's have a final round of applause, please, for Rhea Brown, Laurent Pfefferkorn, and Jeffrey Olnick. Thank you very much.